The little red LED on the card reader didn't just blink, it sneered. It was a sharp electronic rejection that echoed louder than the hum of the AC unit overhead. Which, by the way, had been rattling like a dying lung for 3 years because Director Harrison Vance preferred spending the maintenance budget on team-building retreats to Cabo. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who have mortgages they can't afford and secrets they can't bury. I just stood there holding my plastic lanyard looking at the glass doors of Omnicorp Solutions like I was inspecting a crime scene that hadn't happened yet. The glass reflected my face. 48 years of practice neutrality, eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic, and a posture that said middle management but meant ballistics expert. Card trouble, Victor. The voice came from behind me, dripping with the kind of false sympathy you usually find in a divorce lawyer's foyer. It was Donovan, our new chief of security. The title was a joke. Donovan was an ex-cop who got bounced from the force for excessive enthusiasm and now spent his days patrolling a hallway of accountants like he was storming the beaches of Normandy. He smelled like Old Spice and insecurity. "It's red, Donovan," I said, my voice flat. "Usually means the bill wasn't paid or someone pressed the wrong button." "Director wants a word," Donovan said, hooking his thumbs into his tactical belt. He wasn't wearing a gun, just a taser and a flashlight, but he stood like he was packing a howitzer. "Escorted entry only." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip, the way his eyes darted to the receptionist, then back to me. He was performing. This was theater. And if you enjoy watching a grown man try to intimidate a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried, literally and metaphorically, you might want to hit that subscribe button because this train wreck is just leaving the station. "Lead the way, brave soldier," I said. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened, that little muscle jumping in his cheek like a trapped insect. He swiped his own badge, a gold-plated monstrosity he definitely paid for himself. And the doors hissed open. The office smelled the way it always did, on a Tuesday stale coffee, ozone from the copiers, and the low-grade despair of 200 people, realizing the weekend was still 4 days away. I walked past the rows of cubicles. Heads popped up like gophers. Brenda from accounting looked away quickly. Gary from logistics suddenly found his stapler fascinating. They knew. In a corporate ecosystem, the smell of blood travels faster than a reply-all email. Donovan marched me past my own office, a modest 10 by 10 box where I'd spent 12 years pretending to care about OSHA compliance and diversity and inclusion seminars, and straight toward the mahogany double doors at the end of the hall. The director's suite. Harrison Vance was sitting behind a desk that cost more than my first car. He was flanked by 2 suits I didn't recognize. Corporate legal. Probably outsourced, looking like they were carved out of soap and cynicism. Vance was 50, tanned to the color of a well-oiled baseball mitt, with teeth that were blindingly, aggressively white. "Victor," Vance said, not standing up. He gestured to a chair that was significantly lower than his own. A classic power move. I remained standing. "Walter," I replied. "Donovan here seems to think I'm a flight risk. He's breathing down my neck so hard I'm worried he's going to propose." Donovan bristled by the door. Vance offered a tight, condescending smile. "We've decided your services are no longer required, effective immediately." The silence that followed was heavy, textured like a wool blanket in summer. I let it stretch. I wanted to see who would twitch first. It was the lawyer on the left. He shifted his weight and tapped a pen. "Rookie, internal restructuring?" I asked, throwing them the bone they were expecting. "Exactly," Vance said, looking relieved that I was playing by the script. "We're pivoting your role. It's legacy, archaic. Need fresh eyes on compliance. Someone who understands the modern agility required in federal contracting." Modern agility. That was code for someone who won't notice. I'm funneling 6 figures a month into a shell company in the Caymans. "I see," I said. "And the 12 years of institutional knowledge, the audit trails, the delicate relationship with the Department of Labor?" "We have it covered," Vance said, waving a hand as if swatting a fly. "HR has your severance package ready. Standard 2 weeks provided you sign the NDA. An NDA, of course." They wanted to buy my silence with the equivalent of a used Honda Civic. "I don't think I'll be signing that," I said softly. Vance's smile faltered. "It's not optional if you want the check, Victor." "I don't want the check, Walter. I want to know if you're sure about this, really sure, because once I walk out that door, I can't protect you from what comes next." Vance laughed. It was a bark of a laugh, sharp and ugly. "Protect me? You plan the fire drills, Victor. You organize the potlucks. You're a glorified hall monitor. I think I'll survive without your protection." He leaned forward, his cologne wafting across the desk, something musky and expensive masking the scent of rot. "Donovan, escort is out. He has 5 minutes to collect personal effects, no electronics." "Understood," Donovan said, grabbing my elbow. I pulled my arm away, not violently, just firmly. "Don't touch me." I looked Vance in the eyes one last time. I was memorizing the arrogance. I wanted to remember exactly how smug he looked, sitting on his throne of lies, thinking he was the king of the jungle. He didn't know he was just a termite in a house that was already fumigated. "Goodbye, Walter," I said. As Donovan marched me back through the gauntlet of staring coworkers, I didn't feel humiliation. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, jagged shard of anticipation in my gut. It was the feeling of a sniper adjusting for windage. They thought they were taking out the trash. They didn't realize they were unplugging the containment unit. I walked out into the parking lot, the sun glaring off the asphalt. Donovan stood at the glass doors, watching me to make sure I got in my car. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my real badge, the one tucked deep inside my wallet, one with the silver sticker on the back. I got into my sedan, started the engine, and checked the rearview mirror. Donovan was still there, arms crossed, looking proud. "Enjoy the victory lap, boys," I whispered to the empty car. "Because you just triggered the apocalypse. My apartment is a sterile sanctuary. No cats, no love signs, no clutter, just mid-century modern furniture that looks uncomfortable because it is, and a stillness that would make a monk nervous. It's the exact opposite of the chaotic, sticky mess of incompetence I just left behind at Omnicorp." I kicked off my sensible heels, the ones I bought specifically because they make no noise on linoleum, and walked straight to the second bedroom. To anyone visiting, it's a guest room, a generic bed, a generic dresser, a generic print of a sailboat on the wall. But if you slide the dresser 3 inches to the left and press the knot in the hardwood floor, panel in the closet creates a faint, satisfying click. I pulled the false back of the closet open. It wasn't a high-tech sci-fi command center with holograms. It was worse. It was paper, boxes and boxes of paper. Hard drives are seizable, clouds are hackable. But paper is boring. Paper is heavy. Nobody wants to sift through 12 years of physical invoices, manifest logs, and travel expense reports. Nobody except me. I pulled out a thick black binder labeled Unmapped Asset AFIF 325. This was my life's work. Not the compliance training I pretended to run, but the shadow audit I'd been conducting since the day Walter Vance first charged a $5,000 consulting fee to a company that didn't exist. I sat on the floor, the binder heavy in my lap. I opened it to the most recent tab. The smell of the office was still in my nose, that unique blend of cheap carpet glue and ambition. I needed to scrub it out. I poured myself a glass of water, no ice, room temperature. Efficient. I booted up my laptop, not the company-issued brick they confiscated, but a custom rig with encryption strong enough to give the NSA a migraine. I logged into a backdoor access portal I'd installed in Omnicorp server architecture back in 2005, disguised as a printer driver update. I watched the logs scroll past. They were already scrubbing. "Predictable," I muttered. I could see Donovan's login credentials clumsy fumbling through the HR database, deleting my active status, erasing my email archives. He was using a digital sledgehammer when he should have been using a scalpel. He was deleting the records of the files, but not the metadata of the deletion itself. Every time he hit erase, he was leaving a fingerprint that said, "I have something to hide." The real beauty was what they missed. 6 months ago, I noticed Vance was getting greedy. He wasn't just skimming off the top anymore. He was gouging chunks out of the hull. He had set up a new vendor, Apex Logistics, to handle shipping for a massive defense contract. Apex Logistics was just Vance's brother-in-law with a P.O. box in Delaware. I knew if I moved too soon, they'd shred everything. So, I became part of the rot. I created a ghost. I navigated to the vendor list on my screen. There it was, buried deep in the subcontractor tier Viridian Tactical Supplies. Viridian didn't exist. I had created the LLC using the same shell company templates Vance used. I had routed the paperwork through his own rubber stamp approval process. He signed it without reading, just like he signed everything that promised a kickback. Here's the twist. Veridian Tactical Supplies was the only vendor in the system that was fully 500% compliant with Federal Oversight Regulation 44B. And Regulation 44B requires an automated external backup of all communication involving the vendor. By signing that contract, Vance had legally authorized a redundant server to copy every single email, invoice, and Slack message he sent regarding the project. Thought he was approving another slush fund. He was actually signing a warrant for his own digital wiretap. I checked the status of the Veridian server. It was humming along beautifully, capturing everything. I saw a new email from Vance to his personal lawyer, timestamped 20 minutes ago. Subject: V is gone. Body: we're clear. Donovan walked his out, scrubbed the Discord logs just in case, but he doesn't know about the Cayman accounts. We're safe. I took a sip of my tepid water. The arrogance was breathtaking. It was almost art. He truly believed that because I wore cardigans and organized the Secret Santa, I was incapable of understanding complex embezzlement schemes. He thought compliance officer meant doormat. I reached for my phone, a burner prepaid disposable. I dialed a number that didn't appear in any contact list. It rang once. Status? A voice asked. No greeting, just a gravelly baritone that sounded like it had been gargling with asphalt. This was Handler Zero, my contact at the DOJ. I'm out, I said. They terminated the cover. Compromised? No, I said, running a finger down the spine of the black binder. Arrogant. They're cleaning house because they're about to scale up the theft. They think I was just dead weight. Do we pull the plug? Zero asked. I looked at the screen at Vance's email. We're safe. Not yet, I said. The anger in my chest was cold, heavy, and solid. It wasn't the fiery rage of a scorned woman. It was the geological pressure of a mountain waiting to crush a miner. They need to feel safe. I want them to relax. I want them to think they've won. Let them spend the weekend high-fiving. Timeline? Give me 4 or 5 hours, I said. I have the breadcrumbs laid out. I just need to make sure the rats follow them. You're walking a thin line, Victor. If they realize you have the data, they think my biggest concern right now is filing for unemployment, I interrupted. They don't know I'm the one who built the maze they're running in. 4 or 5 hours, Zero said. Then we bring the hammer. No, I corrected him, closing the laptop with a soft snap. I am the hammer. You guys are just the cleanup crew. I hung up. The apartment was silent again. I looked at the binder. I had them dead to rights. But justice isn't just about the verdict. It's about the terror of the realization. I wanted Vance to sweat. I wanted him to wake up in the middle of the night, wondering why the air felt thinner. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Harrison Vance was pouring a scotch, laughing about the legacy hire he just fired. Drink up, Walter, I whispered. It's the last good drink you're going to have. Memory is a funny thing. Sometimes it's a blur, and sometimes it's 4K video footage with crystal clear audio. For me, it's usually the latter, especially when I'm wearing a wire. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back 5 years. The annual Contractors for Kids Gala. A ballroom at the Hyatt Regency that smelled of desperate cologne, hairspray, and prime rib that had been sitting under heat lamps for too long. It was a sea of black ties and sparkly dresses. Room full of people who charged the government $50 for hammer and then patted themselves on the back for buying a table at a charity event. I was there as support staff, which meant I was holding Vance's extra business cards and making sure his wife didn't drink too many martinis before the keynote speech. Harrison Vance was in his element. He was 3 scotches deep, his face flushed an alarming shade of crimson, holding court near the ice sculpture of a fighter jet. It's a volume game, boys, Vance was shouting to a circle of sycophants, junior VPs from rival firms who were hoping to catch some of his overflow. You think the margins are in the tech? Hell no. The margins are in the logistics, the padding. I stood about 4 feet away, clutching a clutch that contained a high-fidelity audio recorder disguised as a tube of lipstick. I looked bored. I looked like I was thinking about my cat. In reality, I was angling my purse to capture every syllable. But Walter, one of the junior VPs asked, a kid with gelled hair and fear in his eyes, doesn't the DCA audit the shipping manifests? Vance laughed. slapping the kid on the shoulder hard enough to spill his drink. Audit, son. They don't have the manpower to audit a lemonade stand. You bury the cost in misc expediting fees. You charge Uncle Sam $500 for a folding chair because it had to be tactically deployed. It's not fraud if they sign the check. The circle laughed. It was a nervous, wet sound. They wanted to be him, but they were terrified of being caught. Vance didn't have that fear. He had the invincibility of a mediocre white man who had failed upwards his entire life. He turned and saw me standing there. His eyes slid over me like I was a piece of furniture. "Victor," he bellowed, waving me over. "Get over here. Tell these boys about the audit last year, the one with the labor hours." I stepped forward, smiling the smile of a flight attendant during turbulence. "You mean when you reclassified the janitorial staff as environmental sanitation engineers to bill at a higher tier, sir?" The room went quiet for a split second. Vance blinked, then roared with laughter. "See, he knows the game. Best damn secretary in the business." "Compliance officer," I corrected him in my head. "And I'm not playing the game, Walter. I'm refereeing it." "He's a vault," Vance slurred, leaning in close to the gelled hair kid, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that the lipstick recorder picked up perfectly. "Doesn't talk, doesn't complain, just fixes the paperwork. You need a woman like that. Not smart enough to ask questions, but organized enough to hide the answers. Not smart enough. That was the moment. That was the exact second it stopped being just an assignment and became personal. I felt a cold, prickly heat spread across my neck. He didn't see me as a threat because he didn't see me as a person. He saw me as an appliance, a toaster that processed invoices. I kept my smile frozen in place. "Shall I get you another drink, sir? The keynote is starting." Yeah. He waved me off. "Double. No ice, and make sure my wife is sitting next to the senator. Not the stunning blonde from Lockheed. Don't want a scene." I walked to the bar. My hands were steady. I ordered his drink. I looked at the reflection in the mirror behind the bar, the chaotic swirl of the party, the balloons, the "For the Kids" banner drooping on one side. It was all so grotesque. These people were strip mining the country and calling it patriotism. I took the drink back to him. As I handed it over, I looked at his sweaty, jubilant face. "Here you go, sir," I said. "Good girl," he muttered, not looking at me. I went home that night and uploaded the audio file to a secure server. I labeled it Evidence Item 045 Admission of Intent. Back in the present, sitting on my floor with the binder, I touched the digital file on my screen. That recording was the cornerstone. It proved intent. It proved he wasn't just negligent. He was predatory. He had called me not smart enough. I closed the binder. Memory didn't hurt anymore. It was fuel. It was high-octane, clean-burning hatred. "You should have looked at the resume, Walter," I said to the empty room. "I didn't go to community college for business administration. I went to Quantico for forensic accounting." I stood up. My legs were stiff, but my mind was racing. It was time to initiate Phase 2. They had the dumb secretary fired. Now they were going to have to deal with the ghost. Tuesday morning brought rain. Not the cleansing kind, but the gray, miserable state drizzle that turns the world into a smudge. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that was vastly superior to the swill in the Omnicore break room, watching the digital ant farm on my laptop. Vance had brought in cleaners. I could see the network traffic spiking. It was chaotic, sporadic, the digital equivalent of someone running around a room with a shredder, feeding it random documents. My insider in records, Olivia, sent me a text via an encrypted messaging app disguised as a Sudoku game. "Olivia, it's a bloodbath. Donovan is interrogating the interns, asking if they ever saw you with a flash drive. Me, tell him I used to eat flash drives for lunch. Good for fiber. Olivia, lol." Seriously though, they brought in some outside IT guy. Looks like he lives in his mom's basement wearing a Crypto King t-shirt. Crypto King. Perfect. Vance had hired a discount hacker. He tapped into the internal security camera feed. I still had access to the camera in the hallway outside the server room because they hadn't changed the default factory password in 5 years. I watched as a young guy with a majestic neckbeard and a hoodie plugged a laptop into the main switch. He was trying to wipe the server logs. I could tell because the system performance dropped by force of 0%. He was running a brute force deletion script. It was sloppy. It was noisy. "Oh, honey," I whispered, watching him on my screen. "You're not wiping the data. You're just hiding the shortcuts." He was deleting the pointers to the files, but the data blocks themselves were still sitting on the hard drives waiting to be recovered by anyone with a basic understanding of forensics. But let them think it's gone. Confidence is their weakness. Then Donovan walked into the frame. He was pacing, yelling at the IT kid. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read the body language. Donovan was panicked. He was pointing at the server rack, making chopping motions with his hand. Cut it. Kill it. My phone buzzed again. Olivia. Olivia, Donovan is calling ex-employees. He just called Gary from 3 years ago, asking if you ever talked about Cayman or offshore accounts. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Donovan was doing my work for me. By calling around and asking specific questions about offshore accounts, he was confirming to everyone that there were offshore accounts. He was spreading the rumors faster than I ever could. "Keep digging, Donovan," I murmured. "You're digging your own grave." I decided to help them out. I opened a terminal window and executed a small script I'd written weeks ago. It was a breadcrumb, a digital trail. The script created a sudden, localized activity spike in a dormant folder on the shared drive. The folder was labeled Archive 2020 Personal. It was empty except for one file, a receipt for a pizza I ordered 3 years ago. But to the crypto king monitoring the network, that spike would look like a data exfiltration in progress. On the camera feed, I saw the IT kid jump. He pointed at his screen. Donovan rushed over, his face turning the color of boiled ham. They were panicking. They thought I was inside the system stealing data right now. I wasn't. I was sitting 5 miles away eating toast. Donovan grabbed his radio. He started shouting. The IT kid was typing furiously, trying to block the intruder. He initiated a system-wide lockdown. Access denied. The entire Omnicore network went dark. Email, phones, shared drives, everything. The IT kid had panicked and pulled the plug on his own company. I leaned back in my chair. End scene. Now they were blind. They couldn't communicate, couldn't trade files, and most importantly, they couldn't process payments. I picked up my phone and texted Olivia. "Me, why is the email down?" "Olivia, you are evil. The IT guy is crying." Vance just screamed so loud a vein popped in his forehead. This was the grime I lived to experience. The muddy, messy reality of corporate incompetence. They thought they were playing for D chess, but they were actually just eating the pieces. But the fun was just starting. While they were running around in the dark trying to reboot their servers, I prepared the physical package. A simple manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a printout of the Veridian Tactical Supplies vendor agreement signed by Harrison Vance. And highlighted in neon yellow, Clause 44B, mandatory external data redundancy. I wasn't going to send it to Vance. That would be too kind. I addressed the envelope to the senior compliance officer at Raytheon, Omnicore's biggest client, the client that accounted for 50% of their revenue. I sealed the envelope. The glue tasted like victory. Phase 3, I said to the empty room. Let's see how they handle the light. The coffee shop across the street from Omnicore. The Daily Grind had terrible acoustics and even worse bagels, but it had a perfect view of the lobby. I sat in a booth by the window, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like I was dodging paparazzi. Though really, I was just dodging former coworkers who might come in for latte. It was 5:00 a.m. on Wednesday. The blog post had gone live at 5:48 a.m. It wasn't the New York Times. Not yet. It was a niche insta-wide watchdog blog called the Federal Ledger. Small but read by everyone who mattered in DC contracting circles. Title: Midwest contractor linked to ghost vendors and inflated logistics costs. It didn't name Omnicore directly. It cited sources close to the investigation and mentioned a mid-sized firm in Ohio. But it included a redacted screenshot of an invoice for tactical folding chairs at $500 a pop. I watched the lobby through the window. It started slowly. A receptionist looked at his phone, frowned, and whispered to the guard. Then a suit walked by, checked his BlackBerry. Yes, some of them still use BlackBerries, and stopped dead in his tracks. By 5:55, the lobby was a hive of agitated insects. I saw Vance storm through the glass doors, phone glued to his ear. He looked disheveled. His tie was slightly askew. He was shouting at someone on the other end. Probably the PR firm he kept on retainer for reputation management, which was really just a guy named Chad who knew how to delete Yelp reviews. My burner phone buzzed. It was Zero. "We have movement," Zero said. Raytheon just flagged Omnicore's vendor status. They're pausing payments pending a review. Fast, I said, blowing on my coffee. The envelope must have arrived. Vance is calling in favors, Zero continued. He's trying to reach Senator Klein. Klein isn't taking the call, of course he isn't. Klein can smell a corpse from 3 states away. He won't attach himself to a sinking ship. Are you ready for extraction? Zero asked. We can pull you in. Deposition is ready. I watched Donovan run across the lobby, literally run, waving a piece of paper. He looked like a man trying to catch a bus that had already left. Not yet, I said. I want them to sweat a little longer. I want them to turn on each other. Victor, this is dangerous if they figure out you're the source. They suspect, I said, but they don't know. They think I'm just a disgruntled ex-employee leaking petty grievances. They don't know I'm a DOJ asset. If they knew that, they'd be running for the border, not calling PR. Don't get cocky. I'm not cocky. I'm patient. I hung up. Inside the building, the lights on the second floor, the executive suite, were blazing, even though it was bright daylight. I could imagine the scene. Vance screaming about leaks. Donovan interrogating the janitors. The lawyers trying to figure out which shredder was the fastest. I took a bite of my stale bagel. It tasted like cardboard, but in that moment, it was the best meal of my life. Then I saw it, the first crack in the facade. Patricia Vance's executive assistant, a woman who had defended him for 5 years, a woman who had lied to his wife about his late nights at the office, walked out the front door. He wasn't carrying a box. He was carrying his purse and a potted plant. He stopped on the sidewalk, looked back at the building, and spat. Actually spat on the concrete. Then he walked to his car and drove away. The rats were leaving. Patricia knew. He had seen the invoices. He had probably typed half of them. If he was leaving, it meant Vance was trying to pin it on him. Mistake, Walter, I whispered. Never sacrifice the secretary. We know where the skeletons are because we're the ones who buried them. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to a number I hadn't used in years. Patricia's personal cell. Me. If you want immunity, go to the diner on 5th. Ask for Agent Foster. Don't go home. I saw the message change to read. 50 seconds later, thank you. I smiled. Vance had just lost his firewall. Patricia would sing. He would sing like a canary in a coal mine. I finished my coffee. The air in the cafe smelled of burnt beans and rain, but to me it smelled like justice. It was time for the next step. They were panicked, confused, and bleeding. Now I needed to show them exactly who held the knife. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and walked out into the rain. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I was going to walk right into the lion's den. I parked my sedan in my old spot. It was still empty. Nobody had dared to take it yet, as if the ghost of my compliance audit still haunted the asphalt. I walked toward the building. The rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and gray. My heart wasn't racing. My palms weren't sweaty. I felt a strange, icy clarity. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times during boring budget meetings. I reached the glass doors. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Sarah who spent 50% of his day watching TikToks, looked up. His eyes went wide. He grabbed the phone. He's here, I heard his whisper shout. Donovan, he's here. I didn't stop. I pushed through the doors. The lobby was cooler than outside, the air conditioned to a sterile chill. Donovan came bursting out of the elevator bank like a bull seeing red. He was flushed, sweaty, and his tie was definitely stained with mustard. You, he shouted, pointing a finger at me. You are trespassing. I have a restraining order pending.